Nintendo directly lied to us all 4 years ago when they announced that Animal Crossing New Horizons would be getting no additional content.
This will be the last major free content update for Animal Crossing New Horizons.
Then this morning they're all like,
"We have to go back!"
Get it? Because they're both about islands? Now luckily, this is the best kind of lie, considering the fact it wasn't really known to be a lie at the time, included by Nintendo themselves, as I doubt they'd revisit that 4 years down the line. But more because this trailer, the 3.0 trailer plus the Switch 2 edition for Animal Crossing New Horizons, is looking pretty freaking awesome, with new items, new features, and all kinds of stuff. Like that dream stuff looks fantastic. However, something did jump out to me immediately that I had to post to Twitter, and given the reaction to this tweet, I think it is resonating with a lot of people and the reality of the situation, and that is the fact that I firmly believe, given how expansive this update and how out of the blue this update is, we're not going to be seeing a new Animal Crossing for quite some time. And I say this not just as a gut feeling, though it largely is, but also because it reminded me of a very similar situation, at least in my opinion, involving Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which released, as you know, originally near the launch of the original Nintendo Switch back in 2017, and it was effectively content complete, until 5 years later, they announced a Booster Course DLC, which was freaking wild, practically double the amount of content in the game as it released slowly over time, and we now know why that happened, because they knew at that point in time there was going to be a big gap between Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and the next Mario Kart game being Mario Kart World, which, as we now know, wouldn't release until more than 3 years later. So I'm thinking this 3.0 update plus a Switch 2 edition is effectively the Booster Course Pass for Animal Crossing New Horizon, especially when you consider the fact that it didn't announce that there was no more updates coming this time. There could still be more, and that's why I'm thinking the next Animal Crossing is probably at least 3 years away, and I think it's being generous. It could be even further. And this actually makes a lot of sense given the recent release history of Animal Crossing, because even though the series used to be on a 3 to 4 year development cycle between entries, from the last two, from New Leaf to New Horizons, it was actually over 7 years, which, as it turns out, is right in line with my estimate, being the 4 years we already have since New Horizons release, plus the 3 years I'm now estimating based on this update. Which again is possibly a conservative estimate, as there is a chance we could go 8, maybe 9 years between releases. Wouldn't be the first time the game did that. Now, I know my theory may bum a lot of you out. After all, I think a lot of us want Animal Crossing, especially since many do consider New Horizons to be a disappointment, at least relative to the others, though maybe this update will address some of that for some of you out there. And I know myself, I really am excited to see where else they can take the series. But that's exactly why Mario Kart World is actually a great comparison. Now, I know that game is itself divisive and for its own reasons, but the key point I'm trying to make here is that Mario Kart World, say what you will about it, is a pretty substantial departure from the previous Mario Kart game, which is exactly what it needed after 10 years of the previous version between the Wii U release and the Switch re-release. And that's precisely the level of change Animal Crossing may also need after 7, 8, or 9 years of the same game. Especially with them doubling down on that same type of gameplay with the 3.0 and Switch 2 edition update, very much like the Booster Course Pass for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So in that sense, assuming my timeline is accurate, I'm actually really excited to see whatever form the next Animal Crossing may take, as I think it could be something actually new and really interesting, though, you know, we'll have to wait and see for sure, of course. Now, speaking of waiting and seeing, that brings me to part 2 of my theory, as I think this can be expanded to encompass a possible future of a few other Nintendo franchises. Because now that Animal Crossing New Horizons has a Switch 2 edition, I'm pretty sure that makes it the 4th Nintendo Switch 2 edition based on an existing Nintendo Switch game, as in one that's not a simultaneous release, like Pokemon Legends EA or Metroid Prime 4. So along with Animal Crossing New Horizons, we have Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Party Jamboree TV, and Kirby and the Forgotten Land. Now, seeing this list of 4 games that are all based on existing games that exist on prior hardware, it reminded me of something. Maybe some of you already know where I'm going with this. Being the Switch era and all the Wii U ports they got, all the upgraded ports with new content or new features and all that. And it made me realize Switch 2 editions are effectively the Wii U to Switch ports of its era. Albeit better in some respects, since we at least don't have to pay full price for the entire thing all over again if you own the original. So, assuming they are equivalent, we should be able to take a look at the release timing of those Switch ports from the Wii U, compared to whenever a successor for those games appeared, and see what that gap in time might be able to tell us, and maybe give us a glimpse into the timeline we're looking at for successors to these 4 games, again being Tears of the Kingdom, Mario Party Jamboree, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and Animal Crossing New Horizons. And by successor, I don't mean a direct sequel. I don't think anyone's expecting a Jamboree TV 2 or Tears of the Kingdom 2, though that game was essentially a direct sequel itself, but more by a spiritual successor, like the next 3D Zelda, next 3D Kirby, Mario Party, etc. So let's look at the numbers here, which again concerns the amount of time from the Switch release of a Wii U game to its immediate successor, or the closest thing to its successor. Like in Donkey Kong's case, we go from Tropical Freeze to Donkey Kong Bonanza, which isn't super close, but hey, it's something. So looking at this list, we can see the average amount of time, including Mario Kart, going from 8 to World, or 8 Deluxe to World, is 5 years. We're looking at a 5-year gap. Now that game could be considered a bit of an extreme, so we drop that out, get rid of Mario Kart, we're looking at a 4.4 year gap. Now that does still include Donkey Kong, which again, going to Bonanza, they're kind of 2 very different games, one's 2D, one's 3D, made by entirely different teams. If you get rid of Donkey Kong, not a whole lot changes. We're still looking at a gap in time of roughly 3 years and 8 months, or basically 4 years, which basically is right in line with my prediction of when the next Animal Crossing could appear, being 3 years at a minimum from now. And I think that basic timeline of 3.5 to 5 years for all those prior installments would also apply to these 4 Switch 2 games, given the fact that they all released relatively recently. We know this by Tears of the Kingdom itself, a game that itself took 6 years to develop and released just over 2.5 years ago. There's almost no way a sequel will be out within the next 3 years, or before the next 3 years. And again, that's a conservative estimate. Now, obviously there could be spin-offs before then, and that applies to all these games, but if we're looking at key installments, I think they're all at a minimum 3 years away. The only possible exception that could come in maybe a little under that is Mario Party Jamboree, or more accurately, the sequel to that game, because that series has historically been on a 3-year development cycle in more recent times, and given the scale of those games and the fact that they're a known factor at this point, I think means they could get one in under that 3-year time limit if they really wanted to. And if we go back to my chart of the Switch Wii U ports to the upcoming sequel, there are a couple of games that do come in just a hair under that 3-year limit, specifically being Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition to Age of Calamity being a gap of 2 years and 6 months, along with Pikmin 3 Deluxe to Pikmin 4, which is a gap of 2 years and 8 months. So it is possible Mario Party skates in under there, but again, I think we are looking at something pretty close to that 3-year estimate, especially if Mario Party Jamboree TV ends up getting even more content down the line. Now, there is still one more potentially damning factor I haven't mentioned yet, and that's the fact that all those averages are based on the Switch ports that did end up getting a sequel of some kind at some point, as there are multiple games on this list that never got a sequel at all, including Pokken Tournament DX, which is no huge surprise, Captain Toad, in which the previous game released over 7 years ago, and Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, which was released just under 4 years ago. Now, obviously Mario will get a 3D sequel at some point, that's not a huge surprise, and probably Captain Toad too eventually. So I'm less concerned with what that does to the averages. I don't think it would have affected it much at all whenever those sequels may end up releasing. My bigger concern though is what it could mean for the future of these Switch 2 editions, as I think there's a very good chance that one of these games, one of these 4, isn't going to be getting a sequel anytime soon. Obviously Zelda is a safe bet, they're definitely working on the next 3D Zelda at this point. Mario Party will definitely get a new sequel, and of course Animal Crossing as well, considering this entire video is about it. But Kirby and the Forgotten Land is a bit of an odd one. It sold well, and I'm sure we'll get a sequel eventually, but I think it could be one of those games that they don't immediately hop into a sequel, and especially with the Switch 2 edition out there, it may fall into the Captain Toad bucket, where they don't feel like they need to make a sequel quite yet. I could be wrong, I mean, I'm not predicting anything at this point, I just think it's the most likely of these 4 that they hold off on a sequel for some time. So we'll have to wait and see. Again, I think at least it'll be a 3-year wait, but it could very well be even longer in that game's case. So there you have it, my extended theory as to why I believe that the Switch 2 editions are effectively the modern equivalent of the Wii U to Switch ports that we had in the last generation, which I think is interesting for all kinds of reasons, but unfortunately I think also means that these 4 games at least won't be getting a sequel anytime soon. I think that also applies to any upcoming Switch 2 editions as well for games that existed on the Switch, because I think that a big part of these games existing is that they want them to fill in the gap for whenever the next sequel will be released, and that only makes sense if the next sequel isn't anytime soon. So again, I think we're looking at a time frame of 3 to 5 years on average for any potential sequels to the Switch 2 editions and any more coming in the future. But let me know in the comments below what you think of my theory. Am I way off base, or am I onto something here? Time will tell, of course, if any of us remember this video existing in 3 to 5 years, but we'll have to wait and see, and I'm curious to see what happens and what those eventual sequels end up looking like. Again, circling back to Animal Crossing, I think there's a lot of potential left in that series, series, and I can't wait to see what that next game delivers. Hopefully on some of the untapped potential that we have yet to see. I really hope they embrace online far more so than they have before, and I think that could be a turning point for the series. But, you know, again, we'll have to wait and see. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please click that subscribe button. I'd appreciate it. And of course, we'll catch you later, and happy Halloween if you're watching this on Halloween. And if not, I hope you had a good Halloween. Thanks again, everyone. Bye.